Hello, my name is Alicia. I'm going to be talking about Reflection Assignment 7, which goes over language. There are 3 videos. There's a commonality between all of these videos. They all discuss language. And what I've gathered are the different facets language can have for processing within the brain. The first video dives into how language is endlessly variable. There's a guy named Noam Chomsky, and in the early 1950s, he proposed a theory which states that language has its versatility and it's caused by grammar. In fact, all languages have grammar rules according to Noam Chomsky. He also claimed that these rules are innate, which means that you're just born knowing and are not born with a blank slate. According to Noam Chomsky, the brain must be hardwired to know all these languages, or not to know the languages per se, but to know how to learn languages. He created this thing called the generative syntax, which shows the order of words in a hierarchy system via syntax trees, and it shows all of the possible structures for sentences. What is syntax? It's just the rules that govern how to use a word, what makes the word, so on and so forth. But we encounter a problem because hashtag universal grammar isn't so universal. The languages that we come across as we learn more about the world, because we are not all knowing beings, is contradicting the rules that Chomsky once thought was the rule of life, the rule of language, speech. So, in other words, hashtag no universal grammar. Because in order to really understand how language is used, you would have to look at all of the languages. And each language has its own set of rules. And so it would be too much information to gather to really understand the complexity that language is. We still haven't even figured out all of the ins and outs of English. So, can you imagine another language? So, is there really a universal rule that governs language no matter where it comes from? Chomsky still feels like there is. And with thinking that language, or rather grammar within language, being the versatility that it gives for language, it comes from within, makes you question acquisition. What's language acquisition? It is the process of placing new information into long-term memory. Working memory is constantly being fed new data, new information, and you're processing it through your executive buffer to see if it should be kept or if it should be just taken away or not remembered, not put into your long-term memory. Is language acquisition genetically determined? This would take us into re-evaluating behaviorism. Behaviorism is still wrong because inside of us we have certain machinery that helps with language learning. It's something that all of us have. And not to mention, some researchers believe that some of the aspects that form the language learning process, machinery in your brain, are also responsible for the development of cognitive function and factors like what helps you think and what helps you have these ideas and such. So, all in all, how can this impact me in my day-to-day life? I know that I can learn more languages if I learn the rules that govern them. Each language has so many rules attached that are not so identical and not so similar to others, which is going to pose a new challenge each time I try to learn a new language. But it's not to say that it's impossible. It just requires me to really want to do it and to put effort into doing it and finding more strategies. So Chomsky did help with, having these ideas and, proposing more, even though it wasn't all true. And that's kind of the purpose of, trying new things and discovering what works and what doesn't work and what's true and not true. So we should owe a lot to Chomsky in the way of learning that grammar is not always going to be in a language that you try to learn. Languages have way different functions and mechanisms that we don't understand because that's just not how we learn. So to keep an open mind and to not feel that everything is governed by how you learn, because there are so many other ways to learn. Video 2 is talking about the link between the language you speak and the likelihood to save financially. Keith Chin is the speaker at this TED Talk video, and he is gathered, from what I've gathered, right, talking about the Chinese language, which he speaks fluently, and the American language, which he also speaks fluently. So he's got those two perspectives. The Chinese language seems to be a bit more complex than the American language, English. Although it is not the official language of the United States, which I didn't know before this video. I probably should have known. But we are learning every day. The Chinese languages are also, you must kind of explain certain principles within your speech, whereas English, American language, I felt was more nuanced, and you must say certain things to get your point across, but it's not so complex. You can still have a little bit of vagueness when you speak, and it's a lot less deliberate of a structure. And well, this goes into how you focusing and thinking more deeper into what you're saying can go into how you behave with your finances. Something I also wasn't aware of prior to this video was that English is a Germanic language, and from the speaker, he mentions that it's on the outlier side of the Germanic language because you must differentiate the tenses, your past tense, your present tense, and your future tense. And they call this futured language. What is futured language? Well, like I've already mentioned, the way you have to say certain things or change your speech in order to indicate that there is something in a present tense or there's something in a future tense. And examples of this are English and Spanish, which I have a little bit of experience in. So what I struggled with as an English speaker was that you can say things in Spanish, but just like in English, you have to change it to signify like whether it's being done in the past or in the future or currently, like right now. And it's a lot of different words and different letters that you have to include in your speech, and it can be a little complicated because it's a little similar, and they've got not only your future tense, you've got this thing called imperfect tense. And it threw me for a loop, let me tell you. So, there's an antithesis to your futured language, which is your futureless language. And they tend to speak about the present and future identically, as if it wasn't something separate like futured language does. And with this, you are saving more, and I'll explain. You are not thinking that you've got the time to gain back money or to earn it back. You are thinking, well, now is the future, and if I spend this now, I will not have this in the future. So instead, I'll save it so that if I need it, I'll be able to have it and use it and not have to worry about not having it. Whereas you separate it and make it a very, very different tense with your futured language, and you are no longer able to really tell that if you spend something right now, that it will impact you in the future because you won't have the money anymore if you're talking about money. And I know for me that I struggle with this problem because with the verbiage I use, I'm an English speaker again, and it can be a little challenging to predict what certain ideas are happening, like your time. If I spoke with a language that had futureless, where not only am I speaking in the present, but I can also be referring in the future, would I change my habits? I wonder this because I could use a little habit change. I'm not gonna lie. So apparently, futureless language speakers save more, and not only with money, but you can use this in different forms, different ideas, like with your health. With your health, if you're thinking about what your savings could be, it could be the current pain state that you're in. If you exchange for future pleasure, I'll use an example, like smoking. Your smoking habit, if you have one, would kind of switch it around. In other words, your current pleasure is going to be exchanged for future pain. You're smoking now for whatever pleasure you get from smoking, but in the future, you're going to have horrible lungs, horrible health, tragic health. And people that, see the future and see the present, because they speak it, can see that, their health will decline if they do something as of right now that could be detrimental to their health. And so they're more likely to say, I'm not going to do this to my body. I'm not going to harm it because I know what to expect. Because basically I'm going through it right now if I let my body go through it. And through this, people who use futureless language are more likely to have better health. And so thinking across the board, if we could figure out, we futured language speakers could figure out a way to make it impact us more and make these ideas seem more closer to us in proximity time-wise than, so far away, like how our language seems to insinuate it is, when it's really not so far as we think. Trick our brains. If there's a way we can do that, maybe we would have better health and better budgeting habits across the board. So this is the main idea that I've gathered from this video. And lastly, this video is being spoken to audiences like myself by Karen, lung. The idea of this video: is language so important, or is the bias simply too strong? And this is talking about the discrimination for people who speak what's said to be broken English. The speaker talks about her parents and how they are super intelligent and they speak multiple languages, can play instruments, and are just really able to understand and think at a greater capacity, yet are spoken to in a rude manner and treated wrong by people who claim that they are not supporting American ideals of speaking the language and learning it because they live there now, which is wrong. It's wrong because they're also not only seen as less intelligent, but they're speaking the same language. It's just not what the Americans that are used to hearing a certain way of speaking are used to. Again, the United States does not have an official language. So, what language could they be referring to? And they also say, you need to speak American. American is not a language. So, it really speaks loud, speaks volumes to people who criticize people who try and put effort into speaking English, and because they say things in a little bit of a different way, are treated as if they don't know what they're saying and are unworthy of respect, and that they have no dignity in that way, which can be very annoying and aggravating, because why not treat everybody with respect? And what is also mentioned in this video is we being, I'm going to say about Americans, we Americans are so hung up on the fact that the English is not being spoken in a clear way, that the fact that people can speak more than just one language is being disregarded. That's not a feat and something to be, impressed by, because learning another language, as people in America who are born learning English can relate to. I spoke about trying to speak Spanish and have gone to school to try and learn the language, and I still find it so challenging sometimes because it's not something I'm familiar with, and there are just different rules that make it to where I've got to switch what I've always known in English to Spanish. But there are benefits to learning another language, like your cognitive flexibility. You've got this elasticity that makes your brain have a workout. Like if you were at the gym doing whatever you do at the gym, like lifting weight or doing exercises like push-ups, all of those things. You do those, but for your brain. That's what learning a new language does for your brain, working it out. And then there's also the fact that it can make your brain a little bit more defensive towards illnesses that come from older age, like dementia or Alzheimer's. Learning a language can really strengthen the protective barriers that your brain needs in order to live and continue to grow and not decay. It's very important that our brains continue to learn and continue to think in different abstract ways. Otherwise, we as human beings will, die quicker. And another thing before I come to a conclusion, I say Americans because I'm an American, and I believe this whole basis is framed with English speakers from the United States in mind. people have a really entitled mentality, from my perspective, where they will idly stand by and force other people to assimilate to their culture that they're known for and have always been, accustomed to, yet, others wouldn't force their culture and their language on people because they know that it can be very challenging to learn a new language. And so we don't really have that relatability, and we can be a little bit rude and ruthless with people as they come into our culture and how we do things. We just want them to do it quickly, get used to it, and it's not very empathetic of us, is it? And the world does not revolve around the United States. Um, I, I, I hope for people to understand that it's very unfair to hold such high expectations of people from other countries outside of the United States to really force such ideals, such high ideals to people, because people are human just as we are, and we, as we encounter and travel around, will notice that it is not so easy as we feel it should be, or as we falsely feel it is. So um, if it's hard for us to understand, perhaps we should do more and put more effort into trying to understand rather than making other people do so. Why not make it an equal playing field and try just as hard? I see no problem in making ourselves expand what we've always known and to reach forward and, give a helping hand, you know. So um, I feel that we are entitled as a people, and we should fix that because it's not impossible. And we've got our own biases, just as others have their own biases, um, our implicit biases, if you will. And it doesn't have to stay this way. And I believe in us as a people, um, as human beings, to gather new information and hear from other perspectives and grow from these, so that we can live longer and share ideas, so we can make the world a better place. And with all of that, I think that concludes my video. Thank you.